Let's go on Scout. The reason why my webcam is not working. Oh, I see. There we go. Perfect. So we're going to do a couple of different things here. Let's see how it works out today. Let's hope the audio is decent enough for everybody else online. Everybody self-conscious? So we'll just start. Okay. Before we get started, D2L, go on there, read the directions. I posted new lab questions on D2L. So I posted some on Friday, but I took one of them out and I added 2 different ones from the lab. So 4 and 5. And you should see them, if you can open up the document right now, you should see them. 1, number 6 kind of gives you a rundown of the kids you're going to read about and putting in order. And then 7, it should give you different charts for the graph for quickly-based measurements. If you look at the first 3 questions, they should be just review of what we went over on Friday. So take a look at those 3. Do you have any questions about what those are and what's in there? They should just be review of what RTI is, what's done for the RTI versus discrepancy model, and then how do teachers use our RTI, which of the students needs more intensive instruction. So those 3 questions shouldn't take a whole lot of time to do. If you go to the lab, and you guys want to bring up the lab, I'll put it on the screen. Why is this giving me a problem? Video. Just look at it, pull up the lab. Now let's take a look at what you actually see for the lab. Everybody else remember how to get to it? Good Pearson, Sped class. Go with course content, study plan, chapter 2, study plan again. And you should get the learning outcomes at 2.2. Now, if you haven't taken the pretest, you're not going to have access to those outcomes. So you have to have taken the pretest already. In some cases, if you took the pretest and scored better, and maybe 2.2 didn't show up at the top, you'll see, if you scroll down, you'll see it at the bottom. But to get to the lab, you click on 2.2 learning outcome. And then there's an activity at the top. It'll load. And if you have, anybody tried to get access to the lab yet and looked at the video? If you don't have QuickTime on your computer, it's quick. The lab is run through QuickTime Player, so you will have to probably download QuickTime, install it in your computer, and then reboot. Okay, just so you know. Because what you'll see is that if you click on, there's the 3 questions I don't want you to answer inside the box, it's on the lab, and then go to the module. So it should look like this. Challenge, wrap-up thoughts, assessment, expected resources. Just start with challenge. And it'll kind of lay out what you'll just be doing for the lab. But even if it doesn't, it's not a big deal. You're going to have to download QuickTime Player to access the video. The video will lay out the goal, and the point of the lab is for you to take RTI through the whole process. So you're going to look at RTI, how is it implemented, how do you assess it, and how do you decide whether kids move through a different tier or different intervention, or how do you decide if they move into special education. So it's going to walk through that whole process. And to get to that process, you click through thoughts, and it's going to kind of ask you some general idea questions about, hey, here's some things to think about. Here are some things that we're going to talk about in the lab. Kind of sets the tone for you. If you go into perspectives and resources, this is what I'm suggesting. There's 10 pages, and each one kind of has a different activity and a different way of using RTI. I'm not suggesting that you go through each piece of that at once. Each piece probably takes you about a half an hour to go through and respond. Do it in half-hour chunks. Don't try to do it all at once, and take your time with it. If you do each page and follow the activities, kind of follow what they're doing, the assessment questions to the lab will be a lot simpler. You won't be going back and forth trying to figure out what's going on. So, for example, if you click on page 1, it goes through and talks about, again, what RTI is. It should be a review for you, but then it goes through what are the 2 assessments we use: progress monitoring and universal assessments. Well, what's the 4th question in the lab? The 4th question is, the 5th question is, what 2 types of assessments are used in RTI? You have to explain what they are. If you go through this step process in the lab, you'll find out what those assessments are, how they're used, and then you'll be able to explain them. If you try to skim the lab and don't read it, you won't have any concept of what's going on. If you try to do it all at once, odds are you'll become pretty confused because the RTI process takes time to understand. If you take your time with it and do it for half an hour at a time, each tier, the lab will be very easy. You won't have any problem with that, I don't think. So it walks through kind of overview of RTI, and then close the window, move on to the next page. This is going to talk about just about universal screening and what that means. And it'll tell you how to execute it. And then as you go through the lab, it breaks down process by process. Again, if you want to see the video or hear the video, which is useful to me, for me it is anyway, just make sure you download QuickTime. All right, just Google QuickTime plugin, download it in the Windows, restart your computer. But they're going to walk through the process. They're going to walk through, you have a classroom at an elementary school, okay? You need to find out how your students are doing in reading. What are you going to do using the RTI process? You're going to first start with a universal screener, which is one assessment given to your students to try to figure out what their baseline data is. So think about that in sports. You have to figure out what everybody runs for a 100-yard dash. Get that baseline information, and then from there, you keep track of that every so often to see if there's any growth in there. That's what you're going to be doing for here. It's going to show you how they do that, and then you're going to track some students' progress. So it looks a lot more cumbersome than it is, but you can click on some of these students, and it'll tell you how they did the universal screening. So it'll take you a couple minutes to figure out how everything is laid out in the lab, but it's important to kind of go through it. And they'll go through Tier 1, and they'll explain Tier 1. After you've done tier 1, stop the lab. Fill out the question, take whatever notes you need to take, walk away from the lab, and come back and do the tier 2 section. Do that section, read that, and then do tier 3. And then you're ready to finish the assessment. Actually do the assessment questions in the lab. Okay? There is nothing on these lab sheets that I'm counting for, I'm trying to grade you on. But there are activities in there that's going to give you practice on how to accomplish it. If you don't do the activities, if you don't go through there, you're going to have a hard time kind of trying to wing it. Your answers are not going to be on point. So if you look at, now I'm going to bring up the lab questions real quick. So here are the lab questions. Do you have, everybody can download the lab questions, no problem? Okay. So these charts will not make sense to you at all unless you've done the prerequisite work to see, okay? These are basically student progress charts for RTI, and they'll look like Greek to you unless you've done the activity. Because the activity will walk you through step by step on what this means, what this looks like, and make a decision. In the end, the lab is asking you, understand all the information and how what goes in RTI, then look at these 3 students and make a decision. Do they move up in a tier, or do they move into special education, or do they move in no tier at all? Why is this important? Because you'll use RTI in school, and this is the same process that you'll use as a teacher to decide whether or not kids move up or down or what level they stay at. This is the exact same process I used when I taught. I used Ames Web, which you'll see it's cited in the case study. We monitored the students. We looked at growth. We made decisions. Do we move them up? Move them out? We change how we're teaching. And this is kind of that whole layout. I went through the whole lab. It's a very, very nice, straightforward way for you guys to get some experience with this. Okay? So why don't you guys take a couple minutes and open up the lab and look at it. If you don't have QuickTime, all the Apple computers have QuickTime built in, I'm sure. If you have a PC and you don't have QuickTime, download QuickTime first, and then reboot your computer. After you've done that, take a look at the lab and go through it a little bit and make sure you understand all the steps it's asking you to do. I want you to leave class understanding what the lab is asking you to do. And then we can get started. We can look at a part as a group and kind of ask questions about what's going on there. Okay? So do that first. Just download QuickTime first. If you have trouble with it, let me know.
During the previous academic.
And I'll walk through it just in case. You guys have a question, I'll use that. Yes.
I'm like lost on where I'm supposed to be for downloading.
Okay, just go to Google and put QuickTime plugin. So QUICK. Yeah. For whatever reason, the lab was made with QuickTime, so it's not necessarily a universal product. I found that out the hard way. You should have made a problem downloading. You do let me know. And webcam come back on? Go. Anybody have trouble on how to balance with that?
Good.
Yeah.
Is that the exact order this way this training comes before any of the space?
Correct.
It may be useful, I mean, if you want to listen to have earphones to the lab. The videos are usually a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and they're just kind of overview what the section is going to be about. Be able to download it.
Mike's working on it.
Yeah. You mean what?
So, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
And then eventually you'll have to kind of go through that whole process. Control sign. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. So, okay, guys, okay. No questions. Yep. So go just go to start video. Restart. And then it should kind of go through all the other. Typical system. Yeah. Okay. Charlie, is you? Go ahead. Yeah. Let's okay. cute. Not open to your so yeah, be on there. There. Okay, it's there. It's fully on. Bring up right. Wow. Pull it home. Yeah, and then what it's going to do is allow you to play the Yep. Okay, the free touch again. You shouldn't be able to break a lot. Down one quick time. Click on 2.2. We're just doing it to the left. You'll see our job. Same process. Right. And then you module right there. So we can see it start. So right. What? I'm not sure why. Not an issue. Beer is still software for it. Did you have anything on it before? Oh. Oh, okay. Yep, we're gonna allow it. I want to, if you have a question on what to do, I want to see. The lab itself will, the process of the lab will help you answer the question.
before the lab. But the whole point of the lab is to go through the test process using RTI and doing that. Otherwise, RTI doesn't make any sense. Yes.
So is universal screening only used to determine those with struggle and reading skills?
That's a good question. So universal screening is a way to get a baseline data for everybody in the class. From there, you look after you give a universal screen, everybody. So if everybody in this class is in if you're in my first grade class, I give everybody the same universal screen. Okay? You take that test, and I get scores for each and every one of you. From that point, I look at, here are my 10 kids. I'm going to decide, I'm going to look at the lowest third, 3 of you, and I'm going to work with you from there. That's how I decide who's going to get intervention. So the universal screener helps me identify what are my ranges. And if you look in the lab, you'll see they do the ranges as well. Okay, they'll have a sheet of paper and has all the scores. But that's what it'll do. That's the first thing it'll do. Okay. So you get a baseline information, everybody in your class. That's who you're going to figure out, who am I going to monitor for the rest of this time. Universal screener is just a general term used for anything you give for a student that you give across the curriculum to all students. So you can have universal screener in reading, you can have universal screener in math, you can have universal screener in English, social sciences, gym. Just a way of getting baseline data on everybody on the same skill. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure.
So you
Yep. Could you ask me again? That was what I stretched right on the front of 12 and first on Friday. So it's a review reflect. So I scroll down. That's today. Go on to Friday. Or up. So it was on page 33. Review reflect. Yeah, that's the base of the page. There. Yep. That's right.
That's cool.
No, that's fine. I don't have to probably resubmitting it, but let me grade it there first.
Should I just click email?
You know, I'll put the Dropbox.
So did I just do it later?
Yeah. You know, that's let's go. Yeah. And just I'll throw it up there on the board too, guys. Just in case you want a visual. Universal screener. You'll get your probably lowest 25% of students. Look at the tier 1 here, monitor their progress. Before you make a decision on tier 2. If you did the reading and you listened to the lecture on Friday, you'll start to see the terminology is a little bit different because they're using very specific terminology here, but it should start to connect and bridge together. Should.
If you want to state the pretest for all, like 2.1, 2.2, 2.3.
No, the pretest is just for everything.
The pretest in this book is just everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really just want you to work inside that lab. That way you
Can
can.
you look this today?
Yep. Just inside. I just want you to work inside the lab.
Yes.
I'm starting up here.
Yeah. Yes. So. Just ask. So, right.
So I find out your name. You're like,
So we start again. I know this is the pain in the butt yet. When this comes to this. You have questions, you go through it. Ask questions. What is that? So when this gets done downloading, did you type it on the file and then you go through the installation process?
but thank you. I just restarted.
Now, you have an issue now. What's wrong?
Oh, you started. I'm like, oh, that could be it.
Taking that long.
Yeah.
Those of you guys got the lab.
Clear next time. A lot of that's good.
You guys are
No, I'm always expecting those things. Just really the rest of the information is kind of watch out. You need to do that because it's not. Don't foul me.
Just so I can make sure I have everything. Before I press on this.
No, so we just keep track of what you get. So everything that I personally felt. So you had the one activity where I actually looked at case studies. What would be involved? Yep. Yep. And then the other one was leaving. Yep. And then this last. Yep.
You guys have questions about how this process works a little bit as you're reading through the lab? Universal screener is the initial assessment you give to a kid. Decide who you're going to monitor. Monitor their progress by giving them a curriculum-based measurement, and that keeps progress with them. All right? So just think about it in non-educational terms. Think about it as something you do in life. If you play a sport or if you do anything other activity, You kind of get a baseline of what you want to work on. You find a skill that you're weak in. You work on it, and then assess yourself along the way to see if you're making growth in that skill. And that's all it is. This is the test you give yourself. Make sure the skill is being improved upon. It's called progress monitoring. Just don't overthink it too much. It's very applicable to other things in life, just given educational terms. Okay, so where's my here? So you see that this is, that's the results. Is that universal screener. And then from there they pick what kid they want to work with. Based on who scored the lowest in the class, that's what you identify. And give it a reminder minutes. Kids gotta get the internet. No. You have an issue getting the internet?
It was fine, and then
Fine,
we,
it was.
after not long to met.
We had text started like router that we can really close it. So I just didn't find myself.
Good. Can you go into your wireless settings and look for NSU security to log back in? I got it. Get it? I got it. Okay.
You want to go into your, I want to go into my settings.
Get on and check it.
Your settings.
Oh, sorry.
Rents.
You guys see why it's not instructive to check the whole lab at once. Do it in chunks. Give yourself some time to digest the information. Good. That's exactly what we did. That's exactly that calculator they give you for the monitoring progress. It's exactly what we use. Not that piece of software, but the same thing. Compare the rate with the end growth. And it's why the lab is so relevant.
how it works before you leave. Ideally, just so just all on the same page. And know what the lab questions are.
You're not answering the lab inside the lab, right? We're answering the lab in the Word document first. Okay.
Do you know where the lab questions are? Right on the
All those things are already in it. Share the computer with some kids.
Oh, there's lab two questions. Yes.
You don't care about the scores or the pretest right now?
No, I'm not concerned with the scores of the pretest. The pretest is just for your guys' information.
Because we can't get to it, so he's taking it, he already took it and then saved it.
Yeah, we had the same problem here. Just give random scores, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the lab right now and everybody getting access to it.
So we go through the.
I was watching it 100%.
I think I got one wrong already. So we just go with this.
Yep. Go on.
Questions, concerns?
For an answer, do you want short answers? Is that okay with a gut?
No, but it's fine. I mean, if you can summarize the definition, it's going to make your life easier.
Yeah.
I know progress monitoring. I'm not taking them all, trying to figure out if you know it or not.
Right.
You're good? You ready? Wednesday, what to do? Everybody knows.
So that percentage score, how you got 25% there, is that just an example, or can each class or test universal screen?
It's really up to the teacher. I mean, the teacher can decide what they want to target and monitor progress. But, you know, if you do too big of a monitoring program, you're not going to keep up. So you want to make sure it's captured. Percentage makes sense. If you have 10 kids in class, you probably monitor 5. And that was the case. If you had 30 in the class, which I do 50%, it's not much time.
Right.
So you kind of want to make sure that you get a number that's workable. You want to growth. You got to take the test already. Yeah, I get it. Okay. That's good. That's really good. It's good, 30%. You get a lot of growth.
All right.
Can only go up from there. There's sort of the module. Everything should have been up there.
I just had to register it.
It's all right. I don't go through there in the day.
You don't have to go back every time you think of it. Yeah, you can actually click. With the first page, you can.
It's got to be.
No.
I think pretty easy if you read it.
If you read this up, some of them you can skip numbers.
I just updated it for class. I wanted to get rid of the key questions that didn't have any application. And that question pairs is a jump.
Nothing's important. Page 3. Over 5. I didn't pick those answer questions. I answered them. I did the
Well, no, that's okay. I mean,
Oh, you're saying, okay.
Oh,
yeah, you already submitted. Did you? So, yeah, just copy. No, just copy the, ingredients in there and subtract it. Because that's a lot. It's
It
easy.
told me that I got it.
There's charts, it just has them. Yeah, there's charts. Yeah, so we'll go to tier 1. And if you're starting in the lab.
So, yeah, show there's something to
But then also after this, then I'm gonna think, and I have two others, so I was like, trying to like figure out.
So, you go to the assessment, so you've already got that.
We'll see because I think they already launched
You ignore this question. Not for so I think I did 4 and 3. So the goal of the team would be involved. Look at it. And then put these graphs to the side. What's going on with those things?
That's it, that's all of it. Yes, just gonna do it.
Is it allowed to submit one?
Yep. I can delete it. Yeah, I didn't attempt for anybody to do the lab before. Jim, is there a question about it? Pretty straight ahead?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just want us to go through all those pages though, right?
Just 1 through 10.
Okay.
And not the last page that
Oh,
I'll need
just
to do
one.
it again. Yeah.
Okay.
Then you'll see if you go through them, the last question. They're just
Okay.
revealed it.
Okay.
Okay? If you skip around, it's at your own peril. All right?
And that's due tonight,
Nope, going Wednesday.
Wednesday? Okay. And then next week, are we going back to like Friday class?
I'm gonna try to work it out that way. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. All right,
All
thanks.
right? Yep.